Ms. Cheryl Chan.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, in 2019 budget debate, I spoke about the need for a decent living wage for the lower income workers, in particular those with young families, so that they can have more cash at the end of the month and not have to live hand to mouth. I'm glad that there are actions since by the government, from implementing progressive wage models across more sectors, more social programs to support these families, and in this current budget, there are more schemes to uplift the lower income group. This pandemic has seen our strong dependence on the essential workers in Singapore and globally. As we speak, the need for frontline workers to get us through this pandemic has not subsided. Let's remember, we need every segment in our society in good and bad times. Thus, I'm supportive of the measures in this budget that will drive us forward as a nation and help those that are more in need. Our ability to accept this and contribute meaningfully in our own way is what defines us as a growing country that keeps up with time. I see Budget 2022 as a crucial turning point as we adapt to a post-pandemic life, pivoting our industries to the new economy and learning what it takes to address nation building with our citizens at different life stages. A few things stood out for me in Budget 2022. Our strengthened focus on the green transition, building new capabilities for the future, involving Singaporeans to enable healthy aging in place, and addressing concerns on the rising cost of living. Sir, as we seek to forge a new normal, the lingering effects from the pandemic and the lessons learned must be held dearly. With core inflation having risen to 2.1% in December 2021, and with the impending height of the GST, it is only natural that the cost of living continues to bear on the minds of our people. While I'm thankful that the government uses tax rebates, cash payouts, and other forms of aid to cushion the impact of the GST hike for a large majority of Singaporeans, particularly the low-income group, I would like to raise the following for consideration towards a multi-pronged approach to address the rising cost of living on the longer-term horizon. First, strengthening resiliency in critical supply chains locally and globally. Supply chain bottlenecks have been a pertinent issue in 2021, exacerbating in the last quarter with a spillover that may persist through a large part of 2022. The supply chain effects result in rising pressures on all fronts that touches the lives of every individual, from food, transport, utilities, and more. With more severe weather patterns occurring globally and unstable political situations, the likelihood of an end of escalating inflation and costs are nowhere in sight. Singapore's scarcity of natural resources and heavy reliance on imports for necessities from food to energy meant the impetus to redesign our supply chains and buffers to better weather the inflation due to shortages from time to time is critical. I'm certain the agencies have thought about this, the need for diversification and the vulnerabilities of not doing so, as illustrated in the creation of New Water and the 30 by 30 plan. But what I'm suggesting is for a more concerted and focused approach by looking across the entire value chain and deepening our access of capabilities into the critical elements of each part of the value chain. In building these capabilities, a more intentional effort to scale up the number of local enterprises, bringing their expertise international, and to better export Singapore's brand beyond education and governance. Due credit is to be given to Enterprise Singapore for its efforts in helping local enterprises internationalize and assisting the startups. The next steps would be increasing the number and breadth of the different types of enterprises to enable them to create a value chain with scale that can truly create an impact to Singapore's ability in being more self-reliant, especially in the strategic industries. While this company's international growth is important to us, the larger benefit of their growth is the ability to tap on the resources of raw materials, labor, and produce overseas to secure the supply for needs back in Singapore. There have been some successful enterprises like PSA, Capital Land, and many others who have scaled its international operations over the years and are able to compete internationally. We need more of them. And the group of enterprises to create different value chains that are significant to our own supply needs. To illustrate this, I would use an example of the food industry. The 30 by 30 plan today outlined the focus on the supply of 30% of our nutritional needs by 2030, but it doesn't include how we are looking at the food volume supply. In expanding the food supplies, we need to look beyond just basic procurement of supplies. Instead, help local enterprises to scale with partnership models in Southeast Asia or countries where their source of land for agriculture, but they require technology to increase the yield. This would help to enable faster experimenting the growth of different crops and allow us for expansion in future when our local shores are constrained by land availability. The second area I would like to touch on is to increase the workers' ability to have more active incomes. Most people are familiar with the concept of active income during their working years until retirement. But with longer life expectancy and later retirement age, the challenge we face is multifaceted. Often, we hear feedback about ageism at workplace, a lack of work scope redesign that caters for part-time work, returnees from expatriate postings overseas that are unable to find suitable roles due to seniority, etc. As the world becomes more volatile and uncertain, the possibility of a young worker's career being truncated or relocated due to the competitive external climate and remote nature of work is looming. Thus, I'm glad that we continue to invest in the skills and ensuring our workers' relevance in the workforce. Over the years, much has been done to support the upskilling of workers through Skills Future and SG United mid-career programs. However, beyond that, what can be done to provide supplemental pathways to enable our workers to have additional income streams beyond their day job? In picking up freelance roles, it will also allow flexibility in learning new skills, augment their savings, and buffer the slack in the workforce. And for this, I do not mean those in the gig economy that's doing some of the freelance work about deliveries and those where we think more in the blue collar, but really more those in the professional sense. Because age will not become a barrier for these individuals and professionals who choose to continue working in the gig economy after the official retirement age. In my previous speeches, I have also raised the need to provide microjobs for the seniors and the special needs community to better allow more flexibility to provide them a sense of dignity in the road to independence. Could we consider how to expand the scale of microjobs to feed the needs of part-time workers, where women with family care duties and senior workers can also better participate in the workforce? Beyond the need for financial retirement adequacy, our ability to increase the workers' ability to have more active income till later years will enable them to be active mentally and physically for much longer time. And such interactions will only help to lower their need for healthcare services and thus expenses. While it is not uncommon for senior executives to take on advisory roles during retirement, could this practice be expanded to a greater proportion of the workforce? From the expat returnees guiding local enterprises that are looking for internationalization opportunities, or for them to mentor companies by domain expertise or their area of interest, their wealth of experience and network will benefit the ecosystem. This would involve a whole of society approach and a change in mindset as to how they perceive their golden years to be. From a time to enjoy one's retirement, of course, I'm not saying they can't, they could if they choose to, but to another trench of lifestyle where there's a transfer of knowledge from one generation to another. And lastly, balancing the taxation structure and intensifying the use of existing resources. Rising cost of living also impacts us as a nation as the government expenditures increase due to sociological changes in demographics and inflation. While Singapore's comparative advantage is in skilled labour and expertise, and the ability to attract investments due to our stable socio-economic political climate, it also similarly exposes the risk we as a nation face. The recent budget by Minister Lawrence Wong outlined new strategies in generating government revenues, primarily through progressive taxation on different income tiers. While this approach may help to enable a more inclusive and equitable society over time, we still run the risk of not being able to address the return of funds into our reserve that we've dipped into, nor cover the budget deficits. Also, many of the highly skilled labor and multinational corporations are global citizens in nature. They have the ability to relocate or offshore services as long as the conditions and the new host countries are palatable. This undeniably would have an impact on our government revenues on the long run, and there will be new constraints or challenges to raise the corporate taxes unreservedly. As we rethink our nation's taxation structure, it is equally sensible to be prudent in our use of funds and resources as well. This involves creative solutioning to problems, existing problems and new ones, working with existing resources and infrastructures instead of investing in new each and every time we think of solving a problem. In the longer term, it involves looking at the social compact and the partnerships between the government and citizens, including the ones with private sectors as we move towards the green transition. To summarize, sir, with Singapore's reliance on imports for resources, inflation and, by extension, the rising cost of living would be a constant fixture in the years ahead. The way to more holistically manage this issue sustainably, in my opinion, is for us to adopt a whole of government and perhaps even a whole of society approach. We need to become more increasingly sustainable for our own basic necessities and having some degree of independence for strategic resources by being prudent and intentional in our use of existing resources in solving our country's problems. I'll end off with a quote from Charles Darwin, and I quote, "It is not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one that's more responsive to change." And I believe Singapore and Singaporeans have the ability to do so. With that, sir, I rise in support of the budget.